Thank you very much for coming today. We hope that we're going to be able to provide you with a lot of really good information and tips for navigating the IRB process. And what I'm going to be talking about today, you can see my discussion points. I want to give you some background as far as why are you here? Why do you need to learn about this in terms of institutional review boards? Talk a little bit about the specific role of my office, because there is some differences between the actual review committee boards and the role of my office. Talk then also about the specific roles of the boards and what they do. And then I'm also going to go into a little bit on levels of review. I'm not going to be able to do as much detail as I normally do, but it will give you some sense of what you need to be thinking about when you're submitting your research. Okay, so institutional review boards have not been around forever. Some older faculty in the departments and colleges like to remind me of that because they were actually here when there were no IRBs and they're still very upset about it. However, in 1974, with the National Research Act, it basically said that we were going to have institutional review boards to protect the welfare and rights of human subjects in research. And there are specific codes and regulations that guide these processes, okay? They're through the Department of Health and Human Services and also the Food and Drug Administration. It's also important to note that one of the main things that was going on at that time was the Tuskegee study, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. Tuskegee went on for almost 40 years, and basically in 1974, as a result of that, people said that enough is enough. So with the National Research Act, the Belmont Report was written. And the Belmont Report is a critical piece because if you look at the IRB application that you're going to submit, most of the questions on there could fall under one of these three principles that are included in the Belmont Report. And those are respect for persons, autonomy, beneficence, risk and benefits, and justice, which is the distribution of burden and benefits. So for example, when you're talking about informed consent and why you have to do that in the process, basically that falls under the principle of autonomy. Okay, so talk a little bit about the role of the Office of Responsible Research. And the first thing that I want to mention is this thing we have called an FWA, which is a federal-wide assurance, okay? So Ohio State literally has a number that's registered with the federal government that says that we will abide by these regulations. So we have the federal level, we have what we have to do as far as doing research under the umbrella of Ohio State University. Okay, that's very important to remember. We're not independent consultants, we're doing research under Ohio State. And the FWA says that because we take federal funds from the government that we're going to abide by the regulations. We, though, apply the regulations to all research, okay? So that kind of gives you the federal context, the OSU context, and then as far as my office, the Office of Responsible Research Practices, we want to provide administrative support to the research community. So administrative support basically means that office staff are going to screen your applications when they come in for completeness to make sure all the parts and pieces are there. We also do work to support the boards. We conduct the new board member IRB training. And as Richard said, my role, we provide education to faculty and students. We also have a quality improvement team that does a lot of initiatives, including post-review monitoring for educational purposes. We also have to deal with noncompliance. So there's a whole large spectrum of what the office does, okay? Now, even though we have a few office members that are on the IRB boards, my office is not technically the IRB, okay? We're the Office of Responsible Research Practices. Okay, so you have up there, again, what we do, and hopefully that will help to give a little bit of an overview of what we do. Now, let's contrast that with what is the role of the IRB boards. So at Ohio State, we have the Behavioral and Social Sciences Board. We have Biomedical and Cancer, and we have the Western IRB that looks at industry-sponsored clinical trials, okay? So basically, the boards, the main people on the boards are faculty members. That's very important to remember, okay? Because like, again, I said it's not strictly my office making these decisions. So the boards are set up to review the protocols. Behavioral and social sciences is basically anything that is not medical. So we cover all the areas of expertise in all the colleges. We try to get people on the board to represent all those different areas of expertise. And I do like to point out that it's a voluntary service for faculty, and it's a lot of work. Okay, a lot of work. Very important to remember. Okay, so the boards, what is their responsibility? What are they going to look at? Well, they're going to look at your application, and they're going to see if you've told us how the risks to participants are minimized. Along with that benefits have been maximized, okay? So there's a risk-benefit ratio, all right? I always like to use a silly example here, but if you wanted to test the brakes on a car and you wanted to put humans in front of the car to see how the brakes were working, that probably would not be a very good risk-benefit analysis. And your protocol would probably be disapproved, okay? So that's what we look at there. We also want to see that selection of people is equitable, okay? It's okay to eliminate people, but you have to be able to say why you're doing that within your protocol. We're going to look to see if informed consent is in place, and we will talk a little bit more about the specifics of that later. We're going to look at privacy and confidentiality of people, and what have you said you're going to do about that? Privacy, protecting the person, and confidentiality, protecting the data that you collect about them, okay? And also vulnerable populations, that they're protected. Those are the main big areas. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about level of review, and I guess I can go into as much detail until Kim tells me to cut it off. Okay, so basically there's 3 levels of review when you submit your application. Now, this is not a good, bad thing, okay? It's not bad if it has to go to the full board, and you're not great if your protocol is exempt, all right? So full committee, expedited, or exempt are the 3 ways that your protocol can be reviewed. Now, let's talk first about exempt. Typically, what exempt means is your application is actually exempt from having to get an IRB approval. Okay, great. Well, can I just decide that myself? No. Right now, it has to be decided through our office, and we have a person that will tell you if your research can be exempt. Now, there are a few things you need to know about exempt. The main thing is you cannot make changes to your study if it's exempt. So let's say you're doing a survey and then you decide you want to add some survey questions you would not be able to make that change through the amendment process if your protocol is exempt. Exempt is like if you took a picture of your study, it's there in time, it's for that study only, and you can't do anything else. And it has to fit neatly into one of these 6 categories. Okay? So if it does, great, but if it doesn't, then your research cannot be exempt. Okay? All right, let me give a quick example. Category 1, classroom research. That might fit here, I think. So let's talk about what is a normal educational practice, because that's what your research has to be exempt. Okay? So you're a teacher and you teach algebra with methods A and B, and you want to just do a little study in your classroom to see how those compare. They already exist in the classroom. That project could be exempt. A normal educational practice that already exists in the classroom. Okay, but now being the very motivated person you are, on the weekend you read in the literature about method C, and you want to bring that in and study that as well. That could no longer be exempt because it doesn't already exist in the classroom. Okay? So there's an example of classroom research, normal educational practices, and that would be exempt. Okay. Then moving on, in the middle of the spectrum, we have what's called expedited review. And expedited is also minimal risk research. And it's one of 7 categories. I'm going to let you look at those, noting that most SBS research falls in category 7. And what happens here is it doesn't have to go to a full committee meeting, but it's reviewed by one board member. Okay? So it's not exempt. It's not risky enough to have to go to the full board. It's in the middle. 99.9% of social and behavioral sciences research is reviewed by the expedited process. Okay? Gives you a pretty good idea where you're going to land. All right? But I also tell people to ask themselves 2 questions. What are you doing and who are you doing it with? Because the what are you doing, if you have a sensitive topic, okay, you're probably going to have to go to the full committee. All right, so you want to survey children on their liking of a math technique. That is not sensitive. You're probably going to be expedited review, maybe even exempt. Now you want to ask them, though, about their drug usage or sexual activities. Flag, that's going to the full board. Okay, so what are you doing? Who are you doing it with? Now, there, if you have a vulnerable population, sometimes children, always prisoners, cognitively impaired people, that's another chance that you're going to the full board. So if you want to do prisoner research and ask them about their drug usage, you know you're going to the full board. Okay? Now, if you don't know where you fall in terms of level of review, don't guess. Call our office and ask us. And that also brings up a really good point that you can call us. I'm here to tell you we are real people. We're not terrible people. We're here to help you. And you can call our office. We can meet with you to help you. I have office hours every Wednesdays from 1 to 3 in the Pays building. In 234, you can just come in. You can bring your stuff and we'll talk about it. But if you reach out for help, if you need it, you are going to save yourself a lot of time. Okay? All right. So full committee review. Now, a lot of times it's greater than minimal risk. That's going to be more if you're submitting to cancer or biomedical. We have protocols that go to the SBS full convened board, but we still don't consider it greater than minimal risk. But when you're doing a cancer study with experimental drugs, and you have to put in your risk benefit, how many people are going to die in a month, that's going to be greater than minimal risk. Our research just doesn't tend to be like that. Okay? So I know that's quick overview of the 3 levels, but it's based a lot on that concept of minimal risk. And minimal risk basically says that the nature of the activity is not beyond what a person would experience in everyday life. Okay? It's kind of sounds legalish, doesn't it? But again, more than likely, your type of review would be expedited and would not be greater than minimal risk. And I will just put here, for example, here's a full review. Survey on sex with high school students. Identifiable surveys asking about illegal drug usage. Again, if your data is going to be identifiable, that makes it a bigger chance that it might be full board review, especially if you have the sensitive topic. Okay? So that's a way for you to look at it. Again, there's a listing of our office hours. Feel free, though, to contact our office if you need extra help, if you would like to have a meeting. For faculty out there, I'm happy to come to your classrooms and speak. If you would like to have a session like this on a smaller note with your classroom. Thank you.